Hi. All right, we're going to try again. So, if you were here live a few minutes ago, what a mess. I don't know what was happening. I don't know what was wrong, but I'm going to just move on from here. So, welcome to day 4 of my 31-day challenge of going live on YouTube. Today, we are talking about letting kids choose books. Yes, letting them choose books. It really is as simple as that. Hope you stick around. Welcome to Readers in the Making, the live show where we celebrate the magic of books and the joy of helping kids grow as readers. Whether you're a teacher, a parent, or just someone who loves fostering a deep, lifelong love of reading, you're in the right place. Each week, I will dive into actionable tips, creative strategies, and inspiring stories to help you nurture confident, curious, and excited readers, one page at a time. I'm Trina Debery, your host and biggest cheerleader in the journey of building readers. So grab your coffee, your notebook, or maybe even your favorite book, and let's get ready to inspire the next generation of readers. And hey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Let's dive in. Hey, so, all right, now we're on the right track and we're going to talk about letting kids choose books because you want to know the simplest, best, easiest way to get kids to love to read, and that is allowing them to choose their own books. Now, I know what you're thinking. They may pick something too easy, they may pick something too hard, they may not pick just right books. Let me just be honest with you. We've kind of ruined the actual joy and love of reading when we are talking about leveling, and we are so worried about our kids reading books that are on grade level or above grade level or, oh no, below grade level. Books are not meant to be thought of in that way. Readers are not meant to be thought of that way. That is an instructional decision that is being worked through with an educator or a parent and the child, but the child doesn't need to see themselves as a level. They don't need to see themselves as on grade level or below grade level. We need to match children with books that excite them and motivate them and inspire them and teach them. And there's so many different purposes of books. Now, sometimes, yes, we're going to give them a book that has them doing a little bit of reading work because they're practicing new skills. They're working on fluency. They're working on reading like they speak. They're working on intonation. They're working on reading according to what the author has put down with italics or quotation marks or exclamation marks. Or they're reading with, expression. Or they're reading to understand what the word means, or they're reading to decode the word, or they're reading, most importantly, for meaning. That is the key, is for meaning. And we want them to gain information or gain a story, gain something from the book. And that is really the key to reading. And if we want kids to love it, we've got to allow them to choose. Now, most kids are not going to pick decodable readers. Most kids are not going to pick books that are just right for them. But we have to be okay with that. Some of the time, at least some of the time. Now, just like when we teach kids that there's going to be time to play and there's going to be time to work, we want to kind of do the same thing. Most of the time, we want them to feel like reading is play and joyful and wonderful. There are some of that time where we're going to sit down and buckle down and we're going to do some reading work. That makes sense. But we want them to feel like the majority of the time, especially their free time, is up to them. I can't imagine if someone said, "Oh, Trina, by the way, when you have this weekend off, I want you to do this, this, and this. That's what you're going to be focusing on this weekend." No, I think not, because I want to be able to have some control over my free time, over my love, over my joy. When I'm cultivating something that I enjoy, I want to be able to do it in a way that makes me happy. And that's the same way when kids are picking books. We really need to allow them to choose books. One of the things, I'm going to tell you 2 stories. So I've been trying to keep these under 10 minutes, but now I'm all thrown off because my beginning of my video got messed up and I had to start all over again. So bear with me today. One of the things, I'm going to tell you two stories. So I'm going to tell you the story about the shirt activity I did with my students in my classroom that worked really well in helping kids get a good idea of books that were right for them. And then I'm going to tell you a story about a child wanting desperately to read owl books. So let me get to it. Okay, so I'll tell you the owl book story first. So I had a little boy who came into second grade, and by all nature of reading assessments and observations and knowing where kids land and where kids are and should be and all those things, he was struggling to read on a second grade level. He was reading more on a kindergarten level, and he had already been retained in first grade. So I felt like we're kind of having an academic emergency. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to help him progress and move forward a little bit faster than what he has been doing. Not that I think we should put timetables on kids, not that I think that we should rush kids, not that I think we should make kids feel like they are falling behind or they're not enough. But there are expectations when you're in a school system. So I'm like, all right, I got to follow this. And I am like, I put in everything into practice and everything. Like he had multiple reading blocks. He had external help. He had parental help. He had so many things that went into building him as a reader and building his confidence. But one thing was lacking, and that was he wanted to read owl books. And he kept saying he wanted to read owl books. And I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm like, books about owls? And he's like, no. And he was really upset. And he would come home every day really upset to his mom that he didn't get to read owl books. And I really had no idea what he was talking about. And then one day I happened to notice with the guided reading books that I was using, which was in a small group, little readers that like advanced with words and vocabulary and richer text. The back of the book had an owl on it. Now, I didn't talk to my students about levels. I didn't want them to feel like they were a level and they were competing with other people in the class. I wanted them, every groups were really fluid. People were moving in and out all the time. I wanted them to feel like this is the book that's right for them in the moment. This is what we're working on. It can be with some of these other peers. It could not be. It might be you and I. It might, who knows? I didn't want them focusing on things like levels and groups and where they were, because I think that's really a deterrent for kids. And if some kids thrive on competition, I say go play sports. Like I go play sports, do a different competition. I'm not going to have a reading competition in my classroom because it leads to too many kids feeling like crap about themselves. And that's not okay with me. And if that's the one thing that makes a kid feel good about themselves, is that they've read more books in the class, then they can keep that to themselves and have a silent celebration. Anyway, let me not go off track. So I finally realized what he meant by owl books. Now the book that had the owl on the back of it was way too difficult for this student, but I wasn't going to tell him he couldn't read it. I wasn't going to crush him and tell him he knew he couldn't read it. He knew those words were hard for him. He knew that he wasn't comprehending the text. But that didn't stop him from wanting to have that, from wanting to be a part of what he thought was something that he was striving for. And that was a good enough reason for me. So I said, you want the owl book? You got the owl book, buddy. Here you go. Here's some other books I want you to read too, or let's go pick out books that you love. There was a mixture of that going on. What he wanted was the owl book, and I gave it to him. What he later wanted was Harry Potter, and I gave it to him. Could he read that? No. But did he want to? Yes. It made all the difference. He was striving for something. He didn't spend all of his time reading something he couldn't read. He spent some of his time reading what he could read. And you know what? He eventually did read. the Owl book. He eventually did go on and read Harry Potter. He eventually went on and was successful and had a life of reading. And I know this because I followed him. I mean, I didn't follow him like a stalker, but I asked about him years and years and years later because I wanted to know if all of that had worked. And it did. So that's the thing. Sometimes we just want to build their confidence. It's so important. Let them pick books. Let them walk into a library, let them walk into a bookstore, and let them pick books. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you the shirt story, which is how I used to teach kids about picking books, because sometimes libraries and books, and I had a huge classroom library of books, sometimes that feels overwhelming. So I'm like, all right, here's the thing. And I would have 3 different shirts, and one shirt would be a shirt for a toddler, and these kids were 7, and one would be a shirt for a 7-year-old, and one would be a huge extra large like sweatshirt for an adult. And I'm like, all right, I want you to think about these shirts like clothes that you wear. And so I would give one kid the baby shirt, one kid the 7-year-old shirt, one kid the extra large shirt, and they would put them on. And we would all be like, sitting together in our little reading meeting. And the kid with the baby shirt on, I'm like, how do you feel? And he's like, ridiculous. And I'm like, well, yeah, but is there ever a time that we are wearing clothes that are too tight? And they kind of sat there for a second and they're like, well, yeah, when we go to the beach, like we might have a bathing suit on. It doesn't have to be like skin tight, but it's fitting our body. And I'm like, that's a great example. When we go to the beach, sometimes we are wearing clothes that are a little bit tighter. And do we go to the beach every day? No. But do we go to the beach maybe even once a week? Maybe. And so sometimes we're going to pick books that are too tight, that are too challenging, that are a little bit hard, that are not our everyday books. That's okay, because there's still a purpose for that. We still are going to do that. We're not going to do it every single second of the day, but we are going to do it sometimes. That's why it's important. All right. Are we going to ever wear clothes that are too big for us with our big comfy sweatshirt? And they're like, well, yeah, like when we want a big comfy sweatshirt, that might be too big because we're cold and we are feeling like we want to bundle up. And I said, absolutely. Do we do that every single day? Most of the time, no. But do we do it even once a day? Maybe. Maybe at nighttime, maybe when it's time and we're all snuggly and whatever. Yeah, maybe not in Florida, but maybe in other places. And I'm like, is it appropriate to have something that's too big for you, too easy for you? Yes, it is. Why is it appropriate? Because it feels good, because it's fun, because it's snuggly, because we're practicing fluency. There is a point for that. And then what's the important thing? That we wear our normal clothes most of the time? Yeah. Most of the time we're going to pick books that are just right for us, that make us do a little bit of reading work, but most of it feels pretty easy and accessible. But there's times that we're going to have to do some decoding, or there's some times where we're going to have to figure out what that word means. And that's important. So do you see what I mean when I say that there's a time for picking books that are meant to make them work a little bit, but there's also times for them to pick books that are way beyond their reach. And that's okay too. We want to let them pick. We want to let them choose. We allow them to pick graphic novels. We want to allow them to pick comic books. We want to allow them to pick those really hard books that maybe they can't access on their own. That gives us an opportunity to connect with our child and read with our child. And we want to let them sometimes pick books that are too easy, because maybe they're going to read it to a pet. Maybe they're going to read it to their little sister or their little brother, or they're going to read it to you, or they're going to just practice reading it fluently. Because fluent reading isn't always easy. Sometimes when we're first learning to read, especially, we sound like robots. I used to tell my kids that sometimes. I'm like, what do we sound like? And they're like, kind of like robots. And I'm like, yeah, that's why we're going to practice it again. We're going to read the sentence again. We're going to stop and we're going to read it again. And we're going to read it like we were speaking to one another. And so when we read really easy books, that's a perfect time to practice that kind of fluid reading. There's always a point, my friend, always a point. But when we let them pick, we motivate them, we inspire them. All right, so I hope that this helped a little bit. I'm sorry about the beginning of the video. I have taken it down, so if you're watching the replay, you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And that's no problem. So I'll be back tomorrow. I'm gonna be here every day for the month of January. Talk about crazy, it's Saturday, and that's why my hair is like this, because it didn't wash it last night. And that's all right as well. So if you want more tips about reading with your child or book recommendations, I have a newsletter, Readers in the Making. The link is in the description below. And while you're there, like the video and comment on the video and share the video with somebody that will help, because Readers in the Making, together we are building readers, joyful, confident readers, one page at a time. Take care.